Looks like we're slowly coming on to live here. Just gonna grab my book that I wanted to show you all. Hello, there we are, everybody. I think we're on and good to go here. Awesome. Lovely to see you. And if you're on live, say hello. If you're watching the replay, put in hashtag replay for me so I can talk to you when you get on there. It's been a very busy week because we're doing our masterclass on thriving in chaos, and that's been a lot of fun, very interesting, and I hope you'll join us. If you have missed the first 2 days, there's still tomorrow and the next day to go, and you can catch all the replays on the Facebook page here. Just scroll down and you'll see them all in there. Make sure you sign up for it so that you'll get the link sent to you so that you'll be sure and catch it. That way you'll also get the replays links sent to you and you'll get connected there, so make sure you check into that. And we'd love to have you join us for that. Thriving in Chaos, talking about how to really maintain your calm, your cool, your zen, your composure, your ability to think clearly, the ability to not be thrown by the things that life throws at you. So join us for that. We're doing it 10 o'clock. I don't even know what time it would be these days because normally 10 o'clock Central, but 10 o'clock Central in North America, they've changed time. 10 o'clock Central in Central and South America is still an hour, is the same as Mountain Time now, and 10 o'clock Central in Europe is different still. So I'm sorry that right now the time changes are really crazy because different places are doing daylight savings at different times. We'll soon be back on to we're all in sync, but for now, it's a little bit crazy, so it's probably 10 o'clock Mountain Time for most of you, but check your time zones and see. I'm broadcasting out of Guadalajara time or Puerto Vallarta time. You can choose either one of those. That'll get you the right one. If you have to, I think Mexico City is actually on the same time for 3 weeks right now too, so any of those should get you the right time zone. That'll tell you what time it is in yours. It's a little bit crazy time of year, but oh well. Daylight savings is earlier for some than others. One of the things you can thrive in chaos, the chaos of time zones, is a very interesting thing to go through. Anyway, today I want to talk with you about your glymphatic system. And no, I didn't say lymphatic, I said glymphatic system. It's different than your lymphatic system. It's actually the equivalent of the lymphatic system for the brain. So your lymphatic system you know a little bit about. That is the trash collector system that takes all of the toxins out of your body, and it optimizes your immune health at the cellular level by getting rid of dead cells, by getting rid of damaged cells, by controlling how things are removed from the body so that they don't build up and grow. And it's always been said that there are no lymphatic glands because the lymphatic system has a series of glands where the tubes collect the stuff, put them into the glands pump them eventually back to the liver and out of the body, etc. But it's always been said there's no lymphatic glands in the brain. And so the brain was thought to not have a system of cleaning itself. The brain didn't have a way to remove trash without a lymphatic system, was the thinking. However, we now know that's not true. There is a lymphatic system, but it's not the same. It doesn't work in the same way, but it does the same thing. And it's called the glymphatic system. And it functions as a sister system to the brain, and they actually communicate. That's how the gut-brain axis, the gut-brain connection works. It is the lymphatic from the gut talking to the glymphatic in the brain and sending signals back and forth. And it's based on these little tiny cells called microglials. They are about 10% of the cells in your brain. They're not actually glial cells, but originally when glial cells were all named, they didn't know that they weren't actually the same type of cell, and so they're called microglials, but they do something very different than most of the other glial cells in your brain. Your glial cells in your brain are what make up all your brain mass. And these are little cells, smaller than the regular ones, and they are called microglials, but their function is to function as the immune system and carry out the cleaning function for the brain. So, before we talk more about the glymphatic system, let's talk a little bit about the lymphatic system and how you can clean and work with that because it's a little more familiar to you, and a lot of the same things will apply to the brain system. So there are some things you can do to increase your lymphatic system's efficiency very quickly and very easily. One, absolutely simple, drink a glass of water as soon as you get up, at least one. I actually recommend you drink a glass of warm water with lemon in it, or 2 glasses of water if you're just drinking regular water. And the reason why this is helpful for the lymphatic system is it gets everything in the gut going and pulling out everything in the body cleaned overnight, etc. But why it works for the glymphatic system is that overnight your brain could shrink as much as 60% through the lack of hydration. Because you're not drinking water during the night, your brain can actually shrink by 60% as the liquids deteriorate in it. So the first thing you want to do is get up in the morning and give it some water. Get that in there. For most people, that's a pretty shocking statistic. You can use it as kind of a guide to help you. If your brain shrinks to help the glymphatic system move toxins around and out of your body, then you have to fill it back up with healthy fluids. You do that by drinking the filtered water with electrolytes, which is where the lemon comes in. That produces the hydration as soon as you wake up. You could even put a glass beside your bed and, as you wake up, whatever, drink your glass of water before you even leave and be ready so that your brain really gets that there. But it's interesting that overnight your brain shrinks so much, loses its liquid, and that gives it space for the body to use the glials, the microglials, to go in and pick up all the toxins and move them out. Very, very interesting system. But first thing in the morning you need to replenish it. So at least 1 big glass of water, preferably 2 over the first 30 minutes. And ideally with some electrolytes in it, so some salt or some lemon or something, not some chemicals, please. Don't put in a sweetener. Don't put in any of these kind of, don't go use those bottles of vitamin water that are pure chemical crap that your body doesn't absorb anyway. Just water with a little bit of lemon. That's perfect. The second thing you need is exercise. Just as exercise causes your lymphatic system to flow, and the way it causes it to flow is that the tailbone pumps, and that as the tailbone pumps through the exercise, it pumps your spinal fluid, which pushes your lymphatic fluid, which makes a whole bunch of things work in your system. So any kind of exercise will work, we don't care. Exercise helps the glymphatic cells to push the toxins that they've collected out of the brain and into the rest of the body where they can get rid of them. And so you want to flush those toxins out of the brain by exercising. Can be as simple as 20 minutes of yoga, a brisk walk for 20 minutes, take a swim, go for a run if you want to. Doing weights isn't quite the same because it's not getting your whole body moving. It's not pumping your lymphatic system. It's not pumping your spinal fluid in the same way. And that spinal fluid pump through the tailbone is very important to get the brain cleaned out. So something that's kind of a whole body movement is better for this particular purpose. So if you're going to work out with weights, that's great, but also do something that's more of a whole body movement for this particular purpose. And the third one is get enough sleep. Although the exercising supports both your lymphatic and your glymphatic flow, the system doesn't become fully activated until you are in a deep sleep. Your lymphatic system does most of its cleaning overnight. Your glymphatic system only does its cleaning overnight. So you really want to be sure you're getting into a deep sleep. Great flow doesn't happen or doesn't help your brain unless it's also paired with good sleep. Now, you want to do what you can to get good sleep. And then maybe we need to talk another day about sleep, but sleep is very important for this garbage removal process. Ideally, 7 to 9 hours. Most of North America is in a great sleep deficit. Many people run on 6 or 7 hours and they say, oh, we feel great on it, I'm fine, I can do this. But you're not giving your body's systems enough time to run their cleaning programs. Your liver has to run a cleaning program overnight. Your kidneys, your lungs run a cleaning program overnight. Your large intestine runs a cleaning program overnight. All that stuff has a 2-hour cycle basically, plus your brain needs its cleaning cycle. So you have to have enough hours for your body to actually do its job. If you're not sleeping, it's not going to do it. So, and they used to say that all these things for the lymphatic system didn't help your brain. It only helped the lymphatic system. Well, they now know that that's not true. They said that because the lymphatic system stops at the brain barrier. And so many of the things don't cross the brain barrier. But recently, scientists have discovered that the brain has this glymphatic system that allows the brain to clean and rebuild itself. These microglial cells function, they fulfill a process that was completely unknown before. They communicate with the brain, as we've said, and what they do is they go in and they prune off the unused synapses that you don't need. They go in and collect any damaged cells. They have this role of cleaning up the brain, but they also have another role, and that role is often a negative role. They can get overactivated and overzealous, and then they clean too much, and they attack the brain, and they become an autoimmune process against the brain. So you really want to balance the microglials. You want it to be functioning just right. The microglials are your primary immune cells for the central nervous system. They are not the same as the phagocytes, which is another kind of cleaning cell that goes in and eats dead cells, but they have this two-sided function where they go in and they clean and prune, but they can get overexcited and go too far. And that's where we have a problem with it. The good side of it is they play the crucial role of regulating the synaptic functions and the phagocytosis of a newborn neuron. So they clean up all the dead bits and pieces and make space for the new ones. It's very important for maintaining plasticity or flexibility of thinking in the brain. And we know at certain stages through life, the brain will do more pruning and get rid of things you're no longer using, and that's how you develop more efficient pathways. But in disease, the microglials, when they get overactive, become neurodegenerative in that they eat too much of the synapses and too much of the brain tissues. And they can become neuroinflammatory. They create inflammation in the brain. Over the last year, you've heard a lot about cytokine storms, and that's where the body's system's going to overdrive, and actually you die from the cells going crazy instead of whatever it is that they're fighting. And that's what's happening in some of the people that have COVID responses that are very extreme, is that the cytokine storm happens, and that cytokine storm is run by the microglials. Is the basic process of what happens there is the microglials set off this reaction that tells the body it's got to just throw everything, and it goes into overdrive and starts attacking things it shouldn't attack. So although they are the trash collectors, they can also become the destructors. Neurons make up about 50% of your brain cells. We know that they are the drivers of the brain processes like thoughts and behavior. Microglials are only about 10% of the brain cells, and they're the cleanup crew. And for their job, they function as an immune cell. They remove dying neurons, they prune synapses, and they generally support healthy neurons. But when something goes wrong, they lose the function to take the ATP molecule. Now, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It's the molecule that releases oxygen and energy into the system. And the circuit between neurons and microglials are what allow these molecules of ATP to release their, to break down into the adenosine, which is what suppresses synaptic transmission and neuron activity and monitors and manages the brain. So if the ATP isn't working right, then the brain can't work right because it's not getting what it needs. And it's the microglials that are supposed to break that down and provide it to the brain. It gets across the brain barrier through the blood as a molecule carrying the bits and pieces, and those have to be broken out and spread through the brain, and it's the microglials that break those down for it. But for some reason, they sometimes get out of control, and then they no longer respond to the ATP. They don't break it down properly, and one of the side effects is seizures kick in. So when it's really extreme, you end up with seizures. And many people who have unexplained epilepsy actually have a problem in the microglials more than anything else. When there's no reason to have epilepsy, but you still have it, when you're having seizures that there's no explanation for, scientists are starting to say the microglials are where you need to look for that. And it's the process of the ATP not being opened and resolved by the microglials that then allows the seizures to kick in. So although they can be the main defender, they can also be the main cause of inflammatory and neurotoxic substances when they go into overdrive and stop working on the ATP. When they stop doing what they're supposed to be doing and get into this hyperdrive, then they become very inflammatory. So a lot of very serious diseases, seizures being one of them, Alzheimer's, dementia, all kinds of the brain diseases are in many ways either made worse or in part caused by a misfunction in these microglials. And it's the substances that the microglials create when they get into this hyperdrive that cause the sickness behavior. So when you have a cold, or you get fatigue or pain or mental fogginess, etc., that's a byproduct of the chemicals that the microglials release into the brain. So what do we do about it? Well, you drink water to keep your brain cleaned. You get exercise to keep things moving properly, to get the garbage system fully functioning. You get your exercise, absolutely, because all those things also apply in the brain, which we didn't know before, but we do know now. And then there are some things we can actually take. There are quite a few drugs in the pipeline that they're working on, that they're trying to figure out how to help the microglials, turn them down when they get into that hyperdrive, to calm them down, etc. But there are some things that we can do for ourselves, some natural things that we can do as well. And one of the most studied ones is actually NAC, or N-acetylcysteine, NAC. You've probably seen it in health food stores and grocery stores. It's over the counter. It's the precursor to glutathione. Glutathione is the food for the cells. It's a major antioxidant for the brain. It gets past the blood-brain barrier, and in clinical trials it's shown that it actually helps calm the microglials down. So NAC is certainly something to talk to your naturopath or your practitioner about if you're feeling like you're having maybe some brain spinning stuff going on. Major depressive episodes, manic behavior, bipolar, OCD, all of these are affected or made worse or in some way sprung through the microglial system, and the microglials make it worse even if they don't actually cause it. And in some cases we're beginning to think that they do actually even cause it. So NAC is certainly something you want to consider. Resveratrol is another one. Now you know it probably as the one that's used for the heart. It's what you find in red wine, in red grapes. It's the active ingredient that is used for heart health, but we now know that it also crosses the brain barrier and mediates the ATP system there, or helps mediate the microglials in the ATP system there. There's been some promise in using it to balance or regulate the microglial storms, the cytokine storms that can happen. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is testing a very interesting series of plant-derived compounds that are highly anti-inflammatory, active in the brain. And some of those are curcumin, which comes from turmeric, lutein, which is the one you know already for people for eyes and macular degeneration, resveratrol, which we've already said, Ganoderma lucuma, the mushroom that is very popular as an antioxidant and a health. Sorry, for some reason my phone's decided to beep. As a very healthy antioxidant and immune booster for us. Berberine, which is very good in balancing blood sugars. And stinging nettle, which has come to the forefront in the last few years as a very strong immune regulator. Pycnogenol, which are your pine nuts and things related to that, boswellia. So there are lots of things that are being studied as ways to regulate and moderate what's going on in the brain. But there are also other ways. You may have seen, and if you haven't got, and you want a good book to read, this is certainly one I would recommend, The Angel and the Assassin by Donna Jackson Nakasawa. She is a journalist and writer, but has done an extremely good job of gathering the research, talking to the researchers, interviewing people, and putting together the story of how this microglial works in the brain. Readable for almost anyone. It's not highly technical, but it's very detailed and informative, and I think you'll find it a fascinating read. And some of the major researchers working on these microglial issues and these very devastating brain diseases are saying that things like mindfulness, things like yoga, things like meditation are actually very good at calming the cytokine storm in the brain and calming the microglials and taking them out of this super spin cycle and back into a more normal cycle and getting that balance back. And so simple things like meditation and yoga and mindfulness exercises can be very beneficial for those things, and that's why we're seeing that they are useful in things like depression and other issues, because they mediate the way those microglials work. So if you want to know how you can fix some of that and how it all works, I would highly recommend reading that book. So we know much of what the lymphatic system does is mirrored in the brain, but the lymphatic system doesn't usually turn against us in the same way. There are some autoimmune diseases that come from the lymphatic system and can do things, but the microglials really seem to go off the deep end in that respect. And it is very complex, but it can create terrible havoc in the brain. And so you want to do what you can to prevent those things. And if you feel yourself heading towards something, you definitely want to do some things to resolve it. So some of those herbs that I mentioned are very worth exploring. You may want to talk to your doctor about those kinds of things if you're having issues with your brain, if memory is beginning to fail, if you're feeling like there's just something going on in your brain that isn't right. Well, there may well be, and it might be related to your microglial cells, and you'll definitely want to have that checked out. But sleep, water, exercise, anti-inflammatory herbs, and doing things to consciously calm the mind and working to turn off the cytokine storms will have serious effects on how well your brain functions, how well it takes out the waste products, cleans the brain, and will provide you a much better quality of life for a much longer time. So I know there's been a little bit of a heavy talk tonight, but it's just such an important one that people are aware of what causes these things and what's going on in the brain and the simple things that you can do to improve it. You'd be surprised at how much improvement you can get out of these really, really simple things. So go try them. Please give me some comments. Tell me your stories. I'd love to hear what you're experiencing. Try having a glass of water every morning when you get up. Work on your sleep, and we'll talk soon. Join us tomorrow morning. We'd love to have you on the Thriving in Chaos as well. So thanks very much for joining me, and we'll talk next week.